Greetings, everyone. I'm Steve Evans of the Kentucky Water Resources Research Institute, and this presentation is part of our Kentucky Watershed Academy Likely Partner Series, focusing on an overview of agricultural partners. The goal of this presentation is to provide some context for later presentations for the partners themselves. During this presentation, we'll introduce you to Kentucky farmers via statewide statistics, speak to some national efforts to promote farmer leadership in watershed management, and then cover a who's who of the major ag organizations of the state. Okay, so we start with an introduction to Kentucky farmers by consulting the 2017 Census of Agriculture from the USDA National Agricultural Statistics Service. We'll begin by looking at the farm size, people, finances, and products to get an idea of what we mean when we talk about agriculture in Kentucky. When you think about the state of Kentucky, one statistic that stands out is that 50% of the state is categorized as farmland according to the USDA. This may seem striking to you, but when you see what that encompasses, the number may make more sense. There were 76,000 farms in 2017, and that number has been slowly but steadily shrinking over the past 10 years or so. The average farm is 171 acres, or a little over a quarter of a square mile. In the top chart, you can see the percentage of farms by size in acreage. So you can see that about 40% are 50 acres or below, 37% are 50 to 180 acres, and then only 6% are larger than 500 acres. So these larger farms tend to skew that overall average a little bit high. Finally, we can see the type of land in farms, with about half in cropland and then near equal amounts of woodland and pasture land. In this case, other lands includes lands occupied by houses, ponds, roads, or wastelands. So we see that a lot of the land in Kentucky is in small farms, and when we take a look at the people, we see that almost all the farms are family farms, with under a quarter of them hiring labor. So you have a lot of farmers that are doing this as a family and only the family unit. The average operator is 58 years old, but those who are farming full-time, this age is much younger at 42 years old. Of the farmers in the state, 29% are new and beginning farmers, which was a higher number than I had anticipated. So you have quite a few younger farmers working full-time, as well as a number of older farmers doing it on the part-time within their families. Farming itself is a $5.7 billion industry in Kentucky. However, 2/3 of the farms make less than $10,000 in sales per year. So here you can see a breakdown of the annual value of sales per year. So 40% of the farms made less than $2,500 in the year. As we shall see, this is due to a lot of small farms that produce hay. So if you think about the farmers, many of them are funding things on their own dime, and many are working part-time just out of love for farming. That's a lot of pressures and a lot to keep up with. As we turn to the farm products, we tend to think of Kentucky as the horse capital of the world. But is that a right conception of the agricultural economy of the state? Try to guess what the top products are in terms of sales. Well, first of all, according to statistics, we want to note that the breakdown of the $5.7 billion industry between animals and their products and crops is 56% to 44%, so almost even in terms of that divide. For animal products, we see that actually poultry and eggs represent 40% of the sales in dollars, with cattle and calf operations second. Horses are third amongst the animals. For crops, grains and beans, which includes corn, soybeans, and wheat in that order, are very dominant, with 74%. Tobacco follows, and then hay. It should be noted that hay actually accounts for almost a third of all cropland in the state. So how does this break down by county? Well, the University of Kentucky, CETIC, produced this map from 2012 data, but it displays a lot of data, including both the amount of sales, which is the size of the dot, and the type of sales, with green indicating more crop sales and red indicating more animal sales, and yellow being a balance between the two. So the top counties from 2017 are Graves County, which is actually 6% of the state sales, mostly due to chicken and egg farms. So you could say Graves County is actually the ag capital of the state. Fayette and Bourbon County are 2 and 3, both due to horses and cows. Christian County would be third or fourth, with grain, corn, soybeans in that order. McLean County with poultry and eggs, and then some grains and beans. Additionally, SEDEC has a web page where you can see the breakdown of farming from each county. So here is the information from Graves County as an example. You can see the products, breakdown of the farm operations, total land and farm sizes, and a lot of other data that's there. You can use this information by clicking at the website at the bottom to get a better sense of your local farm community and some of the struggles and challenges that they face. Ultimately, you want to take this profile and put it together to kind of understand the questions farmers are wrestling with on a daily basis. Farmers are facing questions like how to support their family and wondering how the markets will hold up, or the weather for that matter. They are likely thinking about how to pay for equipment and supplies, how to farm more profitably and more efficiently. And among all these questions is how to care about the land and water resources. However, there are also concerns that the environmental concerns may threaten the rest of their concerns. So there could be trust issues because, like any other community, they think that people outside the community do not understand the demands and challenges farmers face. So if you were a farmer, who would you trust to speak to these issues? Who understands these challenges? Well, likely, above all, the answer is other farmers. For this reason, the Sierra 46 group has compiled a publication to identify ways in which farmers are leading in watershed management and ways in which others can help support farmer leadership. The Sierra 46 group is compiled of the U.S. National Institute for Food and Agriculture and the Land Grant University Funding committees. They're all working together in this joint effort to address the Mississippi River, Gulf of Mexico nutrient hypoxia issue. So this group includes Kentucky's Dr. Amanda Gumbert, who put out a report in 2019 on fostering and facilitating farmer leadership and watershed management projects, a needs assessment. And this report summarizes some of the ways in which farmers are taking the lead and they can be supported. So we're going to look at these two areas, leadership and support, to get some ideas of what we can do in our state. Farmers are leading in watershed management in three ways, representing incremental involvement. The first is recruiting. One farmer who's an early adopter of practices talks to other farmers in their web of influence and by showing practices on their farms. So if you have a few farmers who have bought into the goals of watershed planning, you can empower them to reach out to their networks. The second is consulting. In this approach, farmers take leadership by forming an advisory group to direct the goals, best management practices, tactics, and strategies in the watershed plan. Perhaps various scenarios of BMP implementation can be demonstrated to the farmers, and they choose the ones they believe would be most successful and accepted within their area. In the third level, watershed level leadership, farmers actually share decision making with the government agencies on where to direct implementation funding through peers elected to represent them. So here, the farmers are involved not only in the planning, but also in the implementation funding efforts as well. So how can we support and encourage farmer leadership? Well, the Sierra 46 report identifies 6 different ways which leadership can be supported. The first is just initiation. This means you reach out to a few farmers and start building interest and relationships with them. Then you ask them to reach out to their networks, and it begins to have a snowball effect where it picks up momentum as it goes along. The second is to facilitate. Sometimes just coordinating meetings or giving conversation prompts can start and sustain that conversation, which may take some time. The next way is material support. So you can provide a website for them, provide them with access to meeting rooms, or just provide money to incentivize implementation. The fourth is technical. You can include technical information about how to install BMPs as well as monitoring the improvement of water quality or even conducting field research trials on the success of different practices. There's educational support, and that education can take 2 different forms. The one form is just looking at the science of watersheds and watershed plannings, but on the other hand, you can actually do education on leadership skills such as facilitation and communication and outreach so that they can improve in these skills and support the overall effort. And lastly, there are very many different motivators for farmers, and helping them see how to engaging in watershed planning and implementation can address some of those concerns, can encourage participation. Now, having learned a little bit about the farmers and how they can lead, let's take a look at the agricultural organizations that compose the world of Kentucky agriculture and a little about what they do. Now, this may feel like a whirlwind tour, but remember, uh, you'll get subsequent presentations from these partners themselves. The goal is to understand how they fit into the overall community. First, we want to begin at the local level, the county, in which two organizations serve as the first stop for farmer assistance, depending on who you talk to. That is the Soil and Water Conservation Districts and the Cooperative Extension Service. And so we're going to begin with the conservation districts. There are 121 soil and water conservation districts, or just conservation districts for short, in Kentucky. That's one per county and two in Logan County. They are all special districts, and you elect the 7-member board in your county election. Together, there's 847 conservation districts board members statewide. These are unpaid except for like travel expenses and such. But districts have income from counties, property taxes, state contributions, grants, and donations. And they all have at least one employee, and if sufficient funding, they may hire additional technicians and staff. The purpose is to conserve and develop all renewable resources as stated in the governing statute KRS 262. So you say, well, what does it mean, all renewable natural resources? Well, there's a really broad definition that's there. We tend to just think it's about farms, but includes reforestation, parks, green belts, protecting fish and wildlife. So all of these are issues for watershed planning. So if you're not working with your conservation district, you should be. We're going to be hearing more about this group from Alan Bryant with the Henry County Conservation District later, but I also want to note, if you want to take a deep dive, the Kentucky Division of Conservation on their website has, under the page that is titled Supervisor Training, you can see the Conservation District Supervisor's Handbook, and it gives a really comprehensive guide of the different types of issues that conservation districts are having to deal with. Because conservation districts are such a key partner, they have a whole universe of organizations that support their efforts, which we will quickly overview. This includes professional peer organizations such as the Kentucky Association of Conservation Districts, and the state actually has the Kentucky Division of Conservation, which helps assist and train. So these organizations promote conservation districts in the state. There's also a representative organization, so kind of a leadership organization amongst conservation districts that help shape their policy and rank out cost share projects. And then finally, there are several independent sub-districts that may be formed by conservation districts. The Kentucky Association of Conservation Districts is the professional organization amongst these districts. It helps with providing information relating to the administration, operation, promoting cooperation, getting the message out, and trying to maintain some strong districts within the state. There's also a national organization, the National Association of Conservation Districts. And while watershed coordinators probably won't interact a whole lot, it's important to know that this group is there and serving and supporting conservation districts. Also supporting conservation districts is the Kentucky Association of Conservation District Employees, KACDE. They do have some good training and outreach materials on their website, but this is not necessarily an organization that, again, watershed coordinators would interact with on a regular basis. Their focus is on educating the conservation district employees on items such as website development, technical guidance on how to put field practice in place, and on youth education. The Soil and Water Conservation Commission is the representative leadership group for conservation districts. It's formed from 9 of the 847 supervisors, and they help set the policy, rules, and regulations for conservation districts. And very importantly, they rank out state cost share applications for funding. So having looked at the peer organizations as well as leadership organizations, we're going to look at some of the sub-organizations, one of which is the agricultural district. This is a special district governed under KRS 262. It's set up to encourage and develop agricultural lands by preventing them from being annexed by cities and providing some lower taxes and extra chances for cost share funding. To form an agricultural district, the landowner must own over 250 continuous acres, or they must have some kind of special value. And then they petition the conservation district. And this petition must be done every 5 years. Here we see a map of where these agricultural districts are found. This is compiled by the Division of Conservation, with you can see the county lines in the orange, and the green shows the location of the agricultural districts. So you can see that some counties are much more active in the use of these areas than others. Another sub-district is the Watershed Conservancy District. These can be set up when more than 25 landowners propose it to the conservation district, and then it initiates a hearing and then a referendum. They have their own budget. They're either funded by a flat rate or a property tax, and they typically have a 5-member board to govern them unless they cross county lines and you have multiple conservation districts involved. They are specially formed for developing and executing plans related to water conservation, flood control, erosion, and sediment damage. Typically, these have dams that are being managed via this district, but they are a helpful partner if they're located in your watershed area. And here is a map of where these Watershed Conservancy District, shown in the blue, are as opposed to the Kentucky River basins. So you can see, particularly in the Green and Tradewater Basin, these are rather extensively used. So we've kind of overviewed the conservation districts, and now we want to turn to the other local hub, the Cooperative Extension. Dr. Amanda Gumbert is going to talk more to us about the Cooperative Extension Service in a later presentation, but just as a quick overview, Cooperative Extension was formed nationally as a result of the Morrill Act and the Smith-Lever Act. It's focusing on distributing information produced by agricultural research. And in Kentucky, these local extension offices are they're the same as the county, so 120 of them, and they're governed by KRS 164. Cooperative Extension Service districts promote agricultural practices, techniques, and research, as well as subjects related to home economics, rural and community life throughout Kentucky in concert with the University of Kentucky and the U.S. Department of Agriculture. Funding is through a cooperative extension education tax, as well as fees, general funds from the county or educational districts, or they can also accept private funding. Cooperative Extension Service Districts are controlled by 2 levels of governance at the local level. There's a larger council of 15 to 40 citizens, and these are folks that are interested in agriculture, home economics, such as like Farm Bureau members, homemaker councils, 4-H clubs, commodity groups. So that's the Extension Council. And then there's a smaller group, that's the Extension Board. That's composed of the county judge executive and then 6 citizen members of the district that are nominated by that Extension Council. Then at the state level, there's another level of governance that's there with the University of Kentucky and Kentucky State University, our 2 land-grant universities, who have a whole number of administrative support staff, as well as program coordinators, research, and technical specialists. So that's kind of a quick overview of the local level. Let's look at some of the state partners. We've already mentioned it to some degree, but the Division of Conservation serves to educate and assist farmers and conservation districts. So we're going to be hearing more from Paulette Akers, the Director of Division of Conservation, in a later presentation. The Division of Conservation has a large number of field representatives that help advise conservation district boards and train their supervisors, amongst other duties providing technical assistance. They also administer a number of programs, including the Ag Water Quality Act, providing direct aid to the districts, cost share programs, equipment loans, and the Ag District program. They administer that as well. Stephanie Osterman will be presenting next week on the Governor's Office for Agricultural Development, which serves as a link between the Governor's Office and the ag industries. The GOAP administers two major funding programs, each of which have independent boards. The first is the Kentucky Agricultural Development Board, which oversees the tobacco settlement funds to increase farm income and stimulate markets. Within that fund is the County Agricultural Investment Program, or CAPE, which is frequently referred to as the state cost share. The Kentucky Agricultural Finance Corporation Board issues low-interest loans for lending to farmers and agribusinesses. While for the most part, watershed coordinators won't interact with the Kentucky Department of Agriculture, which is focused more on promoting ag products within the state, there are a few programs in which you might work with them. Within the Office of Agricultural Marketing, which includes the Kentucky Proud program, which is sort of their flag bearer program for Kentucky Department of Ag. Within that office is the PACE program for ag easements, which I'll discuss a little bit more in the next slide. You might also interact with the pesticide regulation program within the Office of Consumer and Environmental Protection, particularly if you're going to do riparian cleanups or aquatic herbicide applications, in which case you'll need certification. Finally, the Office of the State Veterinarian includes regulations for animal composting. I mentioned the PACE program, and this program works with farmers to forever protect farmland from development through an agricultural easement. So it's a little bit different than the agricultural district, which has to be renewed every 5 years. This program, through the agricultural easement, provides farmers with a tax deduction, which can be claimed over multiple years, as well as a tax reduction that can provide some financial incentives for protecting farming, as well as open space or forests. Since 1994, over 31,000 acres have been enrolled. And note that no work has been done in eastern Kentucky, but these can be used to protect forests even while allowing for timber harvesting. Having looked at our state partners, let's take a look at some of our federal partners. We're going to be hearing more from Sonia Keith in a later presentation. She's with the Natural Resource Conservation District, which is part of the USDA. They are a non-regulatory division, and they're geared towards providing financial and technical assistance to farmers who voluntarily want to put conservation practices on the ground. They have several funding programs as well as planning programs to help achieve this. That includes the EQIP program, the CSP program, and the ACEP program. We're also going to hear from Kelly Samuels, who will be presenting on the USDA Farm Service Agency, or FSA, which has a number of programs, but the largest of which is the CRP program, Conservation Reserve Program, which is described by the USDA as the single largest, most effective environmental program. The Farm Service Agency does a lot of programs outside of that, including ag policy, administering credit and loan, as well as other farmer assistance programs. We've mentioned some of the local, state, and federal partners that are out there, but there's a whole universe of other nonprofit and commodity groups that we just don't have the time to hear from all of them. Okay, but these are important because you may want to reach out to certain subcommittees or local chapters of these groups in order to communicate your message to a specific portion of the farm community. So I'm just going to speak about several of these groups in depth, but I want to let you know about the existence of others that you can follow up with them. The Kentucky Farm Bureau, you may be familiar with them from their insurance arm, but they also have a federation arm, which describes itself as the voice of Kentucky agriculture. And so it serves as an advocate for farms and farmers, but also to develop leadership within the farm community through youth development, women's leadership, and other programs. They also provide a lot of market information on various commodities. One of the ways in which the Farm Bureau is involved in watersheds is the Water Management Working Group and Task Force that they help assemble. This task force is comprised of various research, regulatory, and water-related organizations, and it's tasked with addressing, making sure that there's adequate water supply for ag and rural uses. So this is a committee. If you're not paying attention to, pay attention to this task force working group. Another organization that provides a lot of assistance to farmers is KCARD. This is the Kentucky Center for Agriculture and Rural Development. This is a nonprofit that helps farmers to find funding and expand their business by providing educational opportunities, technical assistance, and business support. So, really focused on the business aspect of farming. The Kentucky Ag Council is sort of an umbrella organization for ag. It's focused on communication within the ag community on common goals. And one of the reasons I would direct you to their website is because they have a strategic plan that's available online to help increase farm income and improve the quality of life in Kentucky. And so I recommend that you at least read the executive summary of this plan to understand some of the issues in the farm community. Again, know your audience. And finally, I want to bring attention to the Resource Conservation and Development Councils. To my knowledge, the Jackson Purchase and Pennyrile RC&Ds, as they're known, in Western Kentucky are the most active RC&Ds in the state. But these organizations are nonprofit that were originally set up in 1962 as part of the Agricultural Act, and they've been sustained by farm bills and grants since that time. Their goal is to help the NRCLs to work with communities and interact with the federal government to conserve natural resources and improve rural economies. So the Jackson Purchase Foundation actually funds the Four Rivers Basin Coordinator, which obviously is very active in that region. Again, there's a whole host of other commodity groups and other ag organizations that have independent chapters, work with specific communities. We've given some of the websites available here that you can follow up. But in many cases, working through these local farmers to get opportunities to speak at these groups can be a helpful way to recruit participation in watershed management and implementation activities. And so I hope with that, I've given you a little better understanding through this whirlwind tour of the agricultural community, and you're prepared for the presentations to come.